What is up, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about not a book, but an article. And I think sometimes these shorter works that you can read in well under a half hour are kind of good things to read for us here on BookTube rather than just talking about massive, huge books all the time. How many times in a month can I read a book that's like this big? And yeah, I talked about MLK's A Letter from a Birmingham Jail a few months ago, and I figured, hey, let's talk about something else. So today I'll be talking about Why Socialism, which is by Albert Einstein. And you might think, that's weird. I didn't know Einstein was a socialist. Well, he was, and because he was so smart and stuff and famous for his various scientific theories and all that, this article has been read many, many times. So yeah, I think this will be interesting to talk about just because a lot of people don't really know too much about socialism, don't really know the history, which is, it's totally fine. So let's start talking about the history a little bit. So this article was published in 1949, and basically there were two types of anti-capitalist thought. There was socialism and communism, which in the mid to late 1800s, those were kind of the same thing. But in the mid 1900s, the split between socialism and communism was basically, are you pro-Soviet Union or are you against the Soviet Union? And if you're against them, you're a socialist, and if you're for them, you're a communist. So because Einstein is using the word socialism, it's very clear that he's against the Soviet Union and their, way of governance. And very quickly into the article, you can see this. This article's basically in two parts, not officially two parts, but when I read it, it seems like it's two parts. The first part is anti-technocracy or anti-authoritarian. Now, it's pretty clear to, 99% of people why the Soviet Union was bad, why authoritarianism is bad, and, their persecution of ethnic minorities and just all this stuff. Bad, bad, bad. But why socialism and not capitalism if you want a society that isn't authoritarian? Well, one of the first things Einstein brings up is monopolies. Now, we can think about this in a more modern context. Some of you folks probably have cable, and you may have one, two, or three options. It's like Comcast, Verizon, whatever, Charter. Now, if you have only one option, that company has a monopoly in your region, and they have a disproportionately large amount of control on what they can charge you for cable, or whether or not you can even get cable, or is it too expensive for you? And they have a large amount of control on whether the quality of your internet access is good. Now, that company has a disproportionately large amount of control on your life, on your freedom. And Einstein's basically saying when the Soviets restrict your freedom, that's bad, or when, capitalist large multinational corporations restrict your freedom, that's also bad. And maybe being price gouged by a couple of cable companies isn't as bad as literal Stalinism, but it's still bad. And it's possible to live in a society that's better. That's his theory, I guess. And this sort of capitalist exploitation is what he calls the predatory phase of human development. And he's quoting this historian, Thorstein Veblen. So yeah, that was talking about anti-authoritarianism, whether it be through markets or through the government. But then he starts talking about what should motivate the organization of society. So as he puts it, second, socialism is directed towards a social ethical end. Science, however, cannot create ends, and even less instill them in human beings. So this is interesting because Einstein's like the ultimate scientist, right? But he's acknowledging the limits of science in terms of building a society. So let's talk about vaccines, since that's somewhat of a hot topic. We know through science that vaccines are good, they work. Everyone should get vaccinated if they can. Sometimes vaccines aren't 100% effective, like the flu vaccine I know is, 70% effective or 50%. It depends on the year. But most other vaccines have either a 100% effectiveness rate or close to a 100% effectiveness rate. And we know that through science. But what do we do with that information? Should we have universal vaccines for everyone in our society? I would argue, yes, we should give everyone vaccines free of cost. It makes our society healthier, happier, more economically productive, and all the things that we look for in a society. And we should extend that beyond vaccines. As Einstein says, it is society which provides man with food, clothing, a home, the tools of work, language, the forms of thought, and most of the content of thought. His life is made possible through the labor and the accomplishments of the many millions past and present who are all hidden behind the small word society. Now, you may ask, well, Einstein, can't we just do this in like a capitalist society? Why can't we just do that? And the answer is time and time again, what we should value in a society, or what Einstein believes we should value in a society, food, housing, clothes, vaccines, are not the things we value in a society, but we instead value profit of large multinational corporations. In the news this morning, one of the large companies that has created a recent vaccine has said they're going to start increasing the price of vaccines. It was our public funds, our tax dollars that went into the research and development of these vaccines. But it's these large companies that are reaping the rewards even after they said they wouldn't profit from them. Basically, this is a privatize the gains, socialize the losses situation. Or as MLK would say, socialism for the rich, rugged individualism for the poor. It is this system, this, as what Einstein says, economic anarchy of our capitalist society, that is what he says, the real source of the evil. This is where he makes a very classic distinction about the two types of people in society. We've got the workers who do not share in the ownership of the means of production. They do not get anything from increased prices of vaccines or pharmaceuticals. And then we've got the owner class who does profit off of increasing the price of vaccines or like insulin or whatever, even though it was originally public funds, our money that went into the research and development of these prescriptions, of these vaccines. In the economic anarchy of capitalist society, the owners will charge as much as they can for their goods, and they will pay their workers as little as possible for doing their work. Now, there are some things we can do within capitalism to solve some of these problems, like having a universal minimum wage, or like antitrust laws to prevent massive monopolies, or like having some things socialized. So like some countries have price controls on things like insulin, which has been around for a century. So it costs a few dollars to buy a vial of insulin instead of $300 to $600. However, are these systems enough? However, are these systems of controls on capitalism enough? It feels like we're almost playing whack-a-mole, where we solve one problem by hitting the mole, but then two more moles come up and are like major problems we have to solve. And time again, these problems aren't solved under the capitalist system we live under. In fact, a lot of times they're made worse. In Einstein's time, he talks about the end of the world in this article and the possibility of another war leading to just like the end of humanity. And while war is bad, it's not as uniquely capitalist as the problems we have today. Think about the environmental crisis. Think about the fires in the Amazon. Those fires were started by contractors of large multinational corporations who want to make money off having more farmland. They don't care about the countless indigenous people it will kill. They don't care about the environmental impact that losing the Amazon or large parts of the Amazon rainforest will have on the economy. They don't care about the exploitation to workers and people. They just care about making money. Think about the fires in California that were so devastating. Those fires happened because electric companies didn't want to pay money to update their equipment and reactors, and then a fire started and devastation. And they don't have to pay for the multi-millions or billions or trillions of dollars in damages because, again, privatize the gains, socialize the losses. That's the environment we live in. As Einstein says at the end, I am convinced there is only one way to eliminate these grave evils, namely through the establishment of a socialist economy accompanied by an educational system which would be oriented towards social goals. And again, priorities. Are our priorities to make multinational corporations a ton of money? No, that shouldn't be our priority. Our priority should be health of our community, housing, hunger, education, all of those things. Those are what we should focus on. Oh, and at the end, he talks about how conversations about these topics are taboo. And yes, they are taboo generally, but I'm going to continue talking about them anyway. I don't care if I lose subscribers. The more subscribers I lose, the further away I get from 1,000, so my Discord will become more and more sad as I get further and further away from reading Twilight, as I promised I would when I hit 1,000 subscribers. But in all seriousness, I think these conversations are important. Social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, racial justice. And all these things are connected. And I think the more we understand all of these, the better we can advocate for all these 4 types of justices. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about this article. I will link it so everyone can read it. I definitely went off on side tangents, but that's what I do. And, I think more modern examples are very helpful when talking about this article and for properly representing Einstein's views to this audience in a different generation. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.